Good morning, wherever you are in the US and overseas potentially. My name's Andy Marsh, and I'm hoping we have Matt Gilvey, a colleague of mine, on the phone as well.
I'm here, Andy.
Good job. Love it when a plan comes together. So this is let me address a quick question I had. Yes, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be made available a day or two later. So expect to see an email from us, basically letting you know when this recording is available. I'm not sure if that will include the deck, but I'll talk to Brenna, who I think is on here as well, about making this available too. The deck is really an introduction anyway. So with that said, I want to go through just an introduction of who we are and the topic at hand, and then this will be sort of a chat between Matt and I about the state of the industry and where we see things going. And we hope to have 10 or 15 minutes left at the end for Q&A from the important people. That's you on the phone. We also want to tell you, we expect to give you some of your day back. Although this is advertised at an hour, we expect it to be 30 to 40 minutes total. So that's a bit of good news. So with that said, I'm going to get rolling on this. My name is Andrew Marsh, as you can see there. I've been in the building management industry and facility industry for about 35 years now. I'm one of the old boys, as you can see from the photograph. A lot of time in BMS and energy management, a lot of time with Schneider Electric globally as a global solution architect for them. And now I'm with a building analytics company called BuildPulse. Matt, why don't you just give yourself a quick introduction?
Sure. My name is Matt Gilvey. I've been in the computerized maintenance management system and more broadly software as a service industry for 15 years, so not quite that 35-year mark. And I've been with Fiix, which many of you may recognize as formerly maintenance assistant, for just going on 5 years now, having joined them to help build out both the product and sales organizations.
Thanks, Matt. So I've been looking at this from afar for a little while, and I think we have an issue coming, right? As probably a lot of people on the phone know, a lot of the old skilled engineers are dropping out of the workforce. They're retiring, and they're not, frankly, being replaced. So this was a publication. We got this data from publication, government website a couple of years ago now, actually. But they expect by 2020 that more than 1 in 3 employees in the workplace will be over 55, which gives me some concern. They're going to retire, and rapidly. 1 in 5 could be over 65, and maybe 1 in 10 over 75. So the workforce is aging, and that experience will be dropping out of the marketplace. Also, by 2020, we expect approximately 40% of today's leadership to have dropped out the market. A lot of project versus career, and I can attest to this. There's going to be a lot more outsourcing being done, so there'll be less long-term careers, a lot more, you're employed to do a specific project in the marketplace as well. And approximately 40+% will be Generation Y, and that's not necessarily an issue, but I actually think it is, because just the way they were raised, and hopefully not upsetting some Gen Ys right now, and the type of skill set and their interest levels, frankly, in the marketplace. Some tasks by 2020, 2025, we won't even thought of just yet. So how can that be handled? And the average 10 years estimated about 2.5 to 3 years. And 1 in 4 work virtually. I work away from the office. My wife works away from the office. Many of my colleagues do as well across the globe. This is becoming more and more prevalent. And this is interesting. So the expectation here is that we'll need to be adept at uniting a physically present tribe of employees with a tribe of offsite and often transient staff. So what that really means is we're able to add their skill set ad hoc into a specific task or project going on anywhere in the globe. You don't necessarily have to go into the office every single day. So this is some place we think the market is moving. So those old established engineers who know the systems like the back of their hand, if something goes on, they know exactly which cupboard to go into and which ceiling tile to remove. They're being replaced by people that you'll see walking across the street all the time with their heads on in their iPhone. Different skill set, different interest sets. So now we're looking at big data to potentially help us with this. So big data now has been positioned to provide some of the skill set that is we're losing in the marketplace. So that knowledge and experience is being embedded in some of these work order management systems, is being embedded in some of the analytics systems. We still need a human operator to interpret some of these things, but they don't need to be as skilled as they used to be. Actionable intelligence is being delivered. So you've all heard the term machine learning, pattern recognition, becoming more and more prevalent in the software systems that are being put out of the market today. Big data analytics is crucial, frankly, to the operation of very large portfolios. It's difficult to have your eyes across the entire portfolio at the same time. And oftentimes those small to medium buildings, frankly, they lack anyone on site all the time. You know, there could be anything more than a janitor. So they don't know, you know, when a rooftop unit is starting to fail. They don't know when it has failed until, you know, obviously somebody gets those hot and cold calls. And it's very important that we start to shift from that reactive mode to a more preventative or proactive maintenance. And that's because we need to be ahead of the game. So what's the challenge? You know, we're all being asked to do a lot more with a lot less. And that's why Matt and I are together on this call today. We've got some ideas as to how we can streamline some of these processes to help you do more with less. A big problem is staying current. As you know, when you think about it, IoT has been a buzzword for a few years. It's been reality for a lot longer than that, mind you. But the internet's only been around for a few years in relation to many, many other technologies that are within buildings right now. So things are changing at a rapid rate of change, and it's hard to keep on top of those things. We've got less budget, we've got less people, new equipment, new technology, and all at the same point where you're being challenged to save money while trying to manage and juggle all these things in the market too. So I'll tell you this, and when I first came to the US, this was a mode of operation across an extremely large enterprise. We're not going to touch it till it breaks. The problem being, when it broke, it was very, very expensive. And even today, over half of all maintenance activities are still considered reactive. It tends to put you in the back foot all the time. You're chasing your own tail. You're not working very efficiently. The costs are increased. You know, a critical piece of equipment breaks down on a Friday afternoon that you couldn't foresee. You're going to have to pay overtime, substantial overtime, to get it fixed and up and running. And if that impacts your production line, production facility, then the costs become extremely expensive. And oftentimes it's just short-term fixes, knee-jerk reactions to comfort complaints, you know, hot calls and cold calls and the like. You look at preventative maintenance, I don't know where that came from. It's much more cost effective in newer systems or in largely expensive systems. As you know, I mean, not everybody takes their car in every 3,000 or 5,000 miles for an oil change, despite what the manufacturers might say. It tends to be an expensive exercise, but the US Navy really pioneered this particular type of maintenance years ago as a way of keeping their ships and their engines and their systems in tip-top condition. There is an estimated savings over reactive of 12 to 18%, so it's certainly not to be sniffed at. And of course, on the back end of things, regularly maintained coils, handling units, boilers, chillers, you name it, within a facility will provide energy savings to offset some of that higher labor content from the preventative maintenance approach. So this is really where I want to set the stage. You know, we're trying to shift away from reactive to preventative, and over time to predictive. So now you're actually spending a little bit less on the preventative side, a little bit more on predictive, and overall improve the performance of the facility and the equipment and the life cycle management of that equipment. So what we're going to do now, Matt and I are going to have, we've got a few questions to ask one another, and I will bring up the chat window when we're near conclusion, and Matt and I will attempt to address any questions that are asked by you, the audience, towards the end of that. So I want to start off with asking Matt for a quick rundown of what a CMMS is and its role in a preventative maintenance offering.
Sure. Thank you, Andy. A CMMS, or a computerized maintenance management system, if you don't know what that stands for, basically helps you to get your hands on your maintenance program for whatever state it's in, but it helps you to schedule and organize and track what you're doing. So lay out a plan and give you the tools to execute on that plan. Now, there are multiple related elements that inform that and augment that core process, like parts and inventory and communications. But at its core, it's very much about helping organizations structure their maintenance intelligence in such a way that you can execute on what it is you intend to do. Basically wrapped around the idea that you touched on, which was to extend lifetime, extend reliability, control costs. Now, there are a lot of things, its role in preventive maintenance. It's going to automate a lot of what you may be doing very manually, or maybe not doing it all now. So setting up a software, a CMMS, to trigger work orders automatically based on the plans that you laid out. Balance your resources and maintenance costs. Update all of your asset histories, because a lot of this is just lost in the wash now. You touched on it in the earlier slides of this workforce. I've been in a certain company for decades, and all that information is in my head. Well, the CMMS is going to allow you that some degree of knowledge transfer, so that what's in Joe's head can be passed down to future generations of people who are rolling into the organization. But it's going to give you an organizational access to all that history, everything you're learning digitally about that your assets or your operation. So basically, it allows you to take a more sophisticated approach to managing things. And you all may be doing this in any number of different ways: paper, whiteboard and binders, Excel. It's sort of it's a layer of sophistication above that, but it's going to give you a better way to measure what's going on, so that you understand what you need to improve. If you can't measure it, it's very difficult to wrap your head around what you need to improve and what it's costing you to not improve it. So launching your way into a CMMS, sort of, if you don't know, now you know. It gives you a way to track and measure.
Okay. I was going to ask you actually about Excel, because I've tripped across many people in the field that still run it that way. They've got a huge list of assets in Excel, along with recommended timing of service changes and things. Would you say it's essential to use software to maximize the potential of preventative maintenance? I mean, like I say, many people use Excel, and as far as they're concerned, it's software.
Well, yeah, I would. And of course, it's all relative to the size of the operation and the complexity of what you're doing. So I would say that it is, in today's environment, and as quickly as it's transitioning, it's very important to make the move to a system that can handle more than, Excel. While it is a great tool and it is appropriate for some operations, there's a lot that Excel can't do in terms of timeliness of information and tracking, certainly not without a lot of manual manipulation of that information. Or the other thing I like to say is, I don't really want to be working in a system where I need to ask questions of it. I simply want to be in front of me, telling me, here's what you need to know, here's what's going on, and be able to propagate that information and share that knowledge, share this structure of my maintenance program across an organization, which tends to get a little dicier, certainly as the operation gets larger than, let's say, one person. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it does. So if you're looking at a CMMS, sort of for the people listening to us chat away, what sort of key features should they be looking for?
Well, again, every facility varies greatly, but there are going to be a few things. And it's interesting because on your first two slides, where you talked about the changing face of the workforce, so this, one of the things that we focus on at Fiix is this concept of mobile first. Because and by that I mean mobile apps, and so there are a lot of features within a software that are going to help you transition to getting on board with a formal plan. However, one of the things that is a huge boon to transitioning to these systems and maintaining constant upkeep and actual usage and buy-in on the system is the ability to do things of this sort from a mobile device. So one of the things you want to look at in any solution you're considering is the quality and flexibility of that mobile app. And the reason your second slide about the changing to the Generation Y workforce and things like that is because we know from experience, or maybe it was the first, this one. So the Generation Y workforce, because we know from experience and simply measuring how people use the system, that people are more comfortable and more likely to use the system. And day over day, what we're asking of people on usage is, hey, here are your work orders. Here's what needs to get done. Here are the new things that have either gone wrong or going right in your operation. And then you can simply close these out without any of this, this old mindset of going back to a desktop or back to a mainframe and babysitting a system and asking questions of it, which is why we spend so much effort on this mobile first concept. And this actually extends to, I'll just take that a step further on this concept of staying in front of people. You also want something with a lot of communications backbone, because it's not efficient. You could put in place a very good system that has all of your maintenance intelligence. You went through the homework phases. You told it, here's what I own, here's what my building looks like, and here's what I'm monitoring, and here are my plans. But if I need to constantly go ask of a system, what's new? That's something I may not have the time to get to it. I may simply choose not to do it, to say, is anything new, if I need to constantly check that. So you do want to look for a good communications backbone as well, something that's going to get in front of you in any number of ways, whether it's your own custom dashboards if you're in the system, multiple forms of alerts, or again, to take it back to this concept of mobile, which, to my belief is that it's incredibly mobile now, and it's only going to get more and more mobile, which is actually a philosophy that applies to, all softwares.
Right. So it actually leads me to another question of mine. So I'm hearing you talking about mobile. I need to learn to talk proper.
That's the New Jersey version of mobile.
So what I'm hearing is that actually, which sounds like this needs to be a cloud-based application, right?
I'm sorry?
Does this need to be a cloud-based sort of application, given that you are advocating the provision of mobile tools?
So cloud opens up the entire world to not only flexibility of accessing the system across your organization, let's say one building, but then you think one level up, you think across the enterprise. I own this building. I also happen to own 50 more that I'm tracking and monitoring. And if what I'm doing is, if I'm taking that back to a central server of some sort that I'm maintaining locally, that's actually a cost. There's an inherent cost of having somebody, kicking that server when it misbehaves, things along those lines. And the cloud gives you this flexibility to more easily share resources, share knowledge, and of course, there's no single point of failure for something like that, because so one perfectly maintained server having gone down is still one perfectly maintained server that's down, and the cloud sorts to work your way around this. The other thing that the cloud allows you to do is be part of this greater, what we would conceive of as a maintenance ecosystem. So we are an element of what people are doing from a maintenance perspective, regardless of the type of industry. And BuildPulse, you are part of that greater maintenance ecosystem. And in isolation, there's very little capability for those systems to trade information, knowledge, analytics back and forth. And if you think of even the tools that you all use in your own operations now, if there was no ability to communicate information, and if they exist, they're all over the place, these sorts of systems where I can't get information, I can't copy something out of this or have it communicate to something else, then having these things act in isolation, they're powerful, but they're not powerful enough to be robust where you can build an ecosystem around what you're trying to do. And the cloud allows you to be on board with a solution that's going to be able to have these types of communications, so you can work with all your systems in sort of a cohesive maintenance environment.
So it definitely becomes a 1 + 1 = 3 type scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm sure there's people listening to us right now going, yeah, we'll never get a cloud-based this or a cloud-based that. On our particular facility, we've got important data. How have you gotten around that in the past? And I've got similar experience. You know, we're a cloud-based operation too. But for you, Matt, I mean, what would you recommend people on the call the steps they might need to take with their IT teams to tee up, you know, anything cloud-based,
Right.
frankly?
Well, so oftentimes your IT team, you know, they may already be on board with the concept of cloud. They've been attuned to the concept of cloud for a lot longer than most everyone else, of course, because it was 10 years ago or maybe longer than that, lose track of time. You know, it was a buzzword amongst IT, and then it started to make its way to the rest of us when we began to understand cloud. But really, you do need a few different levels of security robustness built into your application. Now, one of the things is on the front end, you know, there's security, there's you know, any number of modes of security built into the application itself. And then you want an application such as ours, which is hosted. We host it externally. We use Amazon Web Services, their EC2 cloud, and so we get to inherit billion dollar companies' security protocols for replication, backup, bulletproofing, you know, because their job is to make sure that nobody gets to the thing that we're relying on them to protect for us, you know. And in between those two things, with security on the front end and security on the back end, and of course, each company has their own security protocols for, you log into a workstation, you're somebody, it knows who you are. So in effect, there's 3 layers. It's not often as large a hurdle for the IT group as it seems like it's going to be. You just sort of need to make the first ask.
No, that's a good answer. So what ways do you think we could streamline the process? Obviously, a lot of preventative maintenance is based upon specific hours of operation, hours of run. How can we optimize that? Because obviously not all plant runs, you know, 24 hours a day or 12 hours a day. Some of it's cyclical. How can we improve that such that we can help reduce the burden on the end users?
So there's sort of this continuum of, and I'll use that, you know, you had 2 slides, that one talking about, you know, reactive maintenance, where at some point, and for a lot of operations, all maintenance was reactive. And I'm just going to run to fail, which it's not really, that's non-optimal. And then along that continuum, there's preventive. And I would say that a lot of these things, where I think of them as preventive, are sort of set schedule things. Like, I know when Thanksgiving's happening, you know, and I don't need to count how many turkeys I've eaten in the interim, because Thanksgiving's still going to happen on that same day. So I think of preventive as that. I sort of have a set and marginally rigorous schedule, but that's preventive. And I would say I'm doing these things on a time-based or calendar-based basis. And then the next stage, and you want a software that's reflective and receptive to all of these levels, that next stage would really be things along that continuum from condition-based monitoring. And a condition would be almost anything I can count and measure. So to your point, I'm counting hours, or I'm counting mileage, or I'm taking a reading like a humidity in a room, or a temperature, or a vibration reading on something, you name it. If I can count it or measure it, I can react on a condition-based maintenance basis, so that I have a system that can react to those values. So now I'm starting to take it more towards maintenance being done in a timely fashion based on how much I'm using or how that asset is doing at any point in time. And then the next stage, sort of getting towards that holy grail stage of doing your maintenance right before it fails, and that would be sort of optimal, not 15 minutes, but with an adequate enough window to say, I'm doing real predictive maintenance now. And you do a lot of these analytics where I start to say, okay, I have these values, whatever they are, temperature, humidity readings, and they're trending upwards. And I recognize this trend, the slope of this trend, or certain breaches of milestones. I recognize this as a condition where I suspect that failure is imminent, and I want to trigger my maintenance there. So people will insert themselves, or organizations will insert themselves anywhere along this continuum. Now, if I'm coming off of nothing, I'm probably doing a lot of reactive. If I'm coming off of a system of some sort, whiteboard and binders and Excel, then I'm probably more along the line to preventive, where you start to take these next evolutionary steps, is when you start to get on board with a robust system who can track and monitor more than we can do as humans, and start to analyze and say, hey, listen, now's the time to do that. You might have done this either a month ago, in which case you didn't need to do it, it was too soon, or you might have done it a month from now, which means it already broke down.
Yeah. So I think there's a few systems within facilities that could help optimize the maintenance with the CMMS and providing at least near real-time information. Obviously, building management systems spring to mind, but typically alarms on a BMS are just that. It's already happened. The problems occurred. And full disclosure, our technology sits on top of a building management system, and we analyze this over time. So we could be providing, predictive, if you like, service calls into a CMMS, we don't care whose, to trigger those work order management. So we're looking for faults, for instance, in the way a system is being operated, or particularly in a mechanical defects. Let's say an economizer system isn't working properly, a chilled water valve or a heating valve is leaking, there's simultaneous heating and cooling going on because of a fault. And I think to optimize the preventative side of things, it would behoove us as an industry to be feeding into CMMS those faults, especially as some of these faults can be monetized. They could be bubbled up at the top of the list. And they don't have to be triggered, I don't think, immediately, but they certainly should be considered, almost on a weekly basis. Here's your truly preventative things based upon hours run, and the actual hours run, the actual number of cycles in a given period could be fed up real time into a CMMS, along with those other issues that haven't yet resulted in a failure, but are indicative of one coming that way. So BMSs can certainly provide some of that, but again, the BMSs generally are somewhat limited in their communications protocol, open-wise. Some can do that, but oftentimes, especially on the legacy systems, you'll need a third party that can sit on those older legacy, as well as the brand new BMS systems that can diagnose faults ahead of time and feed those into CMMS. Now, would you think, actually this is more a question for me, I think, definitely the use of a third-party system, almost like a fox watching the hen house, could be considered as predictive. And I think that's where your real savings come in, because no longer are you looking at those issues that are hard faults, or they're a hard time-based maintenance issue. Now you can really start to look at maintaining those things when they require maintenance. I have a set of chiller tubes, in a large chiller. They may need once a year.
Actually, that begs the question. This might be a question more for you, because you have a lot more familiarity in the analysis and uses of those systems. But so for a system like ours, which is consuming that sort of data, then the question would be, what sort of system can a system like a CMMS use to gather that info? And then you would ask me what sort of features should I be on the lookout there. So I think that's a good question for you as well. If I'm looking for systems that can gather that info and feed it to a CMMS, what should I look for in those systems?
Well, I think communication. I think you hit on communications protocols and so on with a cloud-based system, and we're the same. Although we tend to sit on the site and pump data out. As some of the audience will know, building management systems for the greater degree have very proprietary protocols. That makes it difficult. Now the industry is moving towards BACnet. It's not there. Probably less than 30% of new systems are still BACnet compliant. A lot of the old manufacturers still sell their own stuff as well alongside. But finding a system that has the ability to talk to those new systems as well as the legacy systems is key. Now that's on, I'm going to call it the south side. So that's talking to systems within the building. On the north side, you also need a system that has open APIs. And by that I mean it's an application point interface, basically freely making the data gathered open to third-party systems. And we do that because it's your data. It doesn't belong to me. If you want to consume that data in other third-party systems, then that's the way we'd recommend it be done. So that's a way CMMS systems could easily and readily get data out of third-party data stores like ours to trigger those work order management systems.
Okay. So then for a building information management system and the analytics, so for instance, being provided. So what sort of, combining that real-time data, like real-time data with a CMMS platform, what's the best way that's going to help avoid breakdowns, like of all sorts, costly, minor, inconvenience breakdowns, but probably the most important ones being ones that are going to cost some coin?
Yeah, I mean, a good example I think I used earlier is an asset breaking down late on a Friday afternoon when you've got to bring in somebody on an emergency basis. You want to try and avoid those wherever possible. And you're always going to have some element of reactive maintenance in any program, right? Things break. It just happens. But if you've got some kind of technology in place that can actually help to predict that based upon big data, in other words, we're able to predict a decline in performance. It could be a leak, a gas leak, refrigerant gas leak, for instance, going on over time. It's not readily applicable to a BMS to pick that up because, well, it won't until something breaks. A cloud-based analytical platform has the computing capabilities to look at the degradation in performance over time and let you know you should be planning a planned maintenance procedure on that piece of equipment because we've noted a decline in its performance, and it will help to avoid those last-minute break and fix type scenarios that we're all used to. And that there's a double whammy to that. One, it stops those potentially production failures because of a lack of an asset, it breaks. And two, of course, it brings down the cost of repair and maintenance because you're doing it in time, just in time, I think, as we said earlier on.
So that does actually take you, that I had described that sort of that evolutionary pathway of adoption of a system and iterating on improvement of your usage of it. But that sort of information being fed to a CMMS, that takes you all the way up the continuum towards predictive, you'd say.
Yeah, I think so. So, there's definitely a process here. It sounds like, many people out there are still using Excel and a variety of software tools in-house to do these things. But it sounds like, at least to me, that the next step would be to have a cloud-based CMMS, and that's primarily due to its computing capabilities, its third-party access to data, and of course mobile application for the workforce to use, within the facility. And then with the addition of near real-time data applications on site, pumping information into a CMMS, that's when you start to lead, I think, towards a more predictive model instead of the preventative model. But both could be used in that way to optimize the preventive maintenance model that we're talking about.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to have a look and see if we've actually got any questions coming in. Yes, you're right. So it looks like I've got 5. All right. Let's start at the top. You can see what I'm looking at. We've already answered that one. So yes, BMS data, EMS data can easily be imported into a CMMS. The BMS sometimes is limited in terms of its integration capabilities. Frankly, they weren't built for this. Now, brand new systems today have a much better chance of having a variety of integration capabilities on board. But if your system's, let's say, 5 or years older, then you're going to be very, very limited. And sometimes it can be costly to do that integration. There are better ways of doing it that provide a more rapid payback. Like I said, the fox in a hen house type thing. So we would be the fox and the BMS and the EMS, the hen house. We're watching the performance of those things and feeding data out. Thank you, Hamid. Another question. Set up and implement CMMSs for clients and sometimes get asked, what happens if the server goes down? Good question. How many backup servers does Fiix utilize, and what's the process if one does go down? I think we already addressed this, but Matt,
yeah, I can ping on that a little bit more. We addressed it only very topically, but so we do use the Amazon EC2 cloud, and which is replicated in 3 or 4 application or locations, coast to coast, North America, so that if there's an issue, say for instance at one data center, we have another place to go and get your data.
Right. Yeah, and we actually use the same cloud-based application for the same rules. Frankly, there's never a server gone down issue that we have, because that's what we pay Amazon for. Next question. This is a good one for you, Matt. My potential application is a water, sewage, and power utility in the Marshall Islands, serving roughly 10,000 people. Organization technical skills are very low. 2 issues for me. Has Fiix been used for water utilities? And how complex is the data input and work order operation?
Okay, so three things I'll address there. Organization technical skills are very low. The mobile's going to be your answer, because again, just get in front of them and then get out of the way. Give them a way to close it out. And the mobile is the easiest, most seamless transition to doing that, because for whatever reason, people just don't object to the mobile. The large majority of work orders on the Fiix platform are getting closed out on the mobile. Has it been used in water utilities? Yes, on a number of occasions, many. And if you want to engage on that after the fact, or you may already be speaking with somebody at Fiix, and we can actually provide you with a list of those clients and contacts if you want to have a chat. And then what was the third, Andy? Oh, how complex is the data import? It's entirely contingent on, do they have data already? See, there's this continuum of getting on board with a system, and oftentimes that first step, other than getting your support from management and making sure you have some dedicated resource for that implementation, which sounds like it may be you, then it's a question of getting your ducks in a row. Like, what do I know about what do I know? So do I know what my assets are and how they're structured? So for instance, I have a reflow stage or a filtering stage, and then so are there subcomponents of that? And do you want to chase your maintenance down to those subcomponent levels? So there are some questions to be answered first. But once that structure is set, and again, much of this may exist already, because they have this information either on paper, hopefully not, maybe some sort of electronic form, then the process of getting that data into a CMMS, in this case Fiix in particular, is made far easier by the fact that information, you've got the knowledge. Now it's just reflecting it within the software. The other half of that's just asset structure. The other half of that is do people know the answers to the questions about what do we plan to do maintenance-wise? Now, a lot of this is informed by, manufacturer or standard industry practice documentation to say, for your agitators, do this every 12 hours, you name it. So that will inform those. But again, reflecting those within a CMMS, ideally you're considering and selecting systems where the onboarding process and the ease of use is foremost among its features. I hope that answered your question.
I think so. The next one is, does Fiix integrate with Xero? It's an accounting software. Do you ever integrate with accounting software? And if so, can you give maybe a use case?
Well, we do, so we do have an application programming interface geared towards that sort of exchange of data. Now, currently, we have a plug and play adapter with NetSuite. We have a few others in development. We do not currently have a plug and play Xero adapter. I don't know whether that's on the current integration team roadmap, but I will get you an answer for that. And I'm going to write down your name. If you are in contact currently with a someone within Fiix, I would ping them with that question. Otherwise, if I don't know if my email address is available, there's my email address right there. Just jot that down and ping me with a email so we have a way to connect.
So Ricardo, your question next. The main problem that I face at the moment with Fiix is to be sure about the data that I collect from it. Once there is always a person behind the keyboard to insert it, how can I put the machines telling the software that they stopped in order to have more reliable data and to give better results in some KPIs?
It sounds like you're asking about online, offline status for the asset. That's my guess. Any of those events are going to be tracked and marked within the system based on offline status and, of course, online status when you bring it back online within Fiix. So it sounds like you may want to, you're currently a Fiix user, obviously. So maybe we'll need to dig into that a bit with support and see how it is you're using the online, offline, and then see if there's a way to improve your usage of that. I hope I understood that question correctly.
Ricardo, yeah, I'd suggest, Ricardo, if you're still on, take a note of Matt's email address and just drop him a note there. It sounds like he may need to go a little bit deeper into that particular concern you had. Daniel, if you're still here, you're next. Is there a best practice to set up a predictive maintenance solution for equipment that's very reliable and has a low number of sensors? Can that be done by state-of-the-art machine learning algorithms? Well, you know what? I'm going to take some of that. So this is partly what we do. Although we concentrate on the building side of things, the envelope, the HVAC systems, energy systems, and so on, we absolutely use machine learning. And that's how we've got, for instance, very, very quick, and our implementations are very low cost because of that machine learning. The old days of doing manual inputs, gone, absolutely gone. We can set up a medium-sized building, a couple 100,000 square feet in a matter of days on our platform using machine learning algorithms. And in the background, they're also used across thousands and thousands of assets, because within the cloud, we've got access to many systems in addition to the ones we're monitoring for a particular facility. And we learn from those particular machines over time and build in machine learning algorithms based on the performance of a tribe of them across the country, across the continent, across the world. So we improve our algorithms based on the larger percentage of things that we see across a much larger proportion than you may have in a facility. Hope that answered that question.
It did for me.
Marvelous. Love it how that works. All right, we've got some good questions. Moving from paper logbooks rounds to a CMMS. How have others walk through owner's question on here? How do you transition from a paper-driven process to, a modern cloud-based instance?
So I started to touch on this earlier, just talking about starting to make that transition and this readiness phase. Getting ready for the homework phase is what I call it, for enabling the system. And really, so you're working in a paper logbook system. So that means you already have a lot of information that you've already set the stage for an implementation. Because if you think about it, regardless of the scale of moving on to a computerized system, the first thing is really the discovery phase, and mapping out where you want to get to. And so you know what your assets are, because in your paper logbook, you're either doing one of two things. You're doing maintenance rounds, so I've got this, here's my checklist of all the machines or, rooms or whatever it is, my assets, broadly termed, that I'm going to visit. And likely, depending on the complexity of what you're tracking in the logbook, here's what I intend to do. And I'm going to confirm that I did that, check it off. The other thing you might be doing, and so I'm going to interpret this broadly. The other thing you might be doing in your logbook may be you have logbooks at each piece of equipment. And so this may be something that's not being done by necessarily a member of the maintenance team. It may be something that's being done by the operator of that piece of equipment, which we would refer to as a checklist user, or a pre-flight checklist if you think about it. So before I can fire this up, I need to go to the logbook and say, yep, I checked I checked engines 1 through 4 and that the brakes work and all this, so you go through your pre-flight checklist to say I've done this. Either of those can be built into CMMS, into Fiix in particular, as procedures, recurring procedures, so that whoever I am, whether I'm one of your maintenance people or I'm sort of one of these more limited usage checklist folks, they have a way, because it's about this, it's enforcing these procedures across a distributed environment and allowing everyone to share and feeding that information to the system. Either way, you're going to be able to make that migration from the paper logbooks, because what the paper logbooks are going to inform during this sort of discovery phase of getting your information into the system, it's going to know the two things that are of utmost importance, which is what do I own and what do I need to do on them, regardless of what that frequency is, daily, weekly, monthly, or for your checklist people, before I fire it up.
Right, good question, good answer. So in the interest of time, I've got about 12 minutes left on the advertised session, so I'll quickly whip through this. A couple of other questions. Does the software have a store's inventory control capacity? And is there a demonstration package that he can trial on the website?
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. So just as the assets and your maintenance plans inform what you intend to do from a maintenance perspective, you also have parts, your inventory of here's all that I own across any number of locations. You can really drill down into complexity and how you're tracking things equipment wise, but or accounting wise, but as it applies to maintenance, with this starting inventory of here's what I have in house, you can also involve those and incorporate those into your maintenance plans by simply saying, you're building out your maintenance plans, and I know when this event comes due, I'm going to use widget number 1. You can also put those on your maintenance plans so that as these systems are generated, again, automatically by the system, that part will be populated to your work order, so that will be, it's planned, it's grabbed. That's one of the important things from a maintenance perspective. I got in front of you as a technician to say, you have to do this job. And by the way, bring widget number 1 with you because you're going to need it. And then I consume that. So you've got a live inventory cycle within the system. Now, again, if you just email me, or you may be in touch already with a Fiix representative, ping us and we'll get you set up so that you can have a look at it and really start to play with it in a real environment. You can do some of that in our online test drive, and I would encourage you to visit there off of our Fiix software homepage, but let's engage on that and we'll take you through it.
Thank you, good one. Hamid, could you explain how an entity can use Lucid, BuildPulse, and Fiix together with data flowing from these cloud-based systems? So I'll take that one. Obviously, you know we've got a tie-up with Lucid. So we augment their offering with the fault detection diagnostics packages that we have. So the two systems actually work together very, very well. CMMS, as you heard earlier, needs real-time data to get better. Otherwise, it's a very, very, you're going to hate me, Matt, a glorified, logbook stuck in the cloud. It's a lot more than that, of course, but it reacts to scheduled information. the ability to feed data into those schedules to augment those systems so they become more reactive in terms of real-time requirements in the field will enable you to become more effective on your site-based operations. So you may have issues, you may set systems up to maintain every 3 months. Well, if the system doesn't actually need it, we'll let them know in a real-time perspective that it doesn't need to be maintained on that 3-month window. It could be 4 months, it could be 10 weeks, I don't know. But the point is, you can use real-time data coming out of those other systems like, Lucid BuildPulse into Fiix to optimize those maintenance requirements. So cellular and Wi-Fi connectivity issues in mechanical rooms. So if you have a mobile device, Matt, and you are in an area, you're in a deep down basement and there is no connectivity to the cloud, how do you get around that? I mean, how do you manage that offline scenario?
So offline capability is our next generation mobile product, which is in early stages of rolling out now. So you'll have access to that soon if you're a Fiix user. It's in beta with 30 some odd customers, Fiix users, so that this addresses that problem, so that I go off into a dark zone where I don't have a live internet connection, so that I do, I've got this list of my work orders, whatever it is I'm working on, but I've gone dark, and then I make updates to those. Once I reestablish a connection with the mothership, it'll sync the information on those work orders.
Yeah, it's a lot like our network appliances. If they lose network connectivity, we store data for several months until the network comes back up. Okay, thank you, Bruce. Hopefully we answered that question for you. Okay, yes, that's the point. Ricardo, I think we answered that one earlier. It's not always about maintenance guide to stop the machine. It's just really about having the information in front of them. So I'm going to mark that one as... Oops,
yeah, Ricardo, I would say connect with your account manager, and they'll take you through the best practices approach to managing that so you can properly track your offline span.
Well, I thought we'd lost you then. Whew, minor panic. Next question, as a manufacturer and supplying machine to amusement parks across the world, can we upload maintenance schedules on CMMS and clients can access directly?
No, you wouldn't. So we have some. We do have some partnering portal provisioning capabilities where you could propagate. I'm using a lot of P's. It's not intentional. Where you can propagate plans to tenants which are part of your platform. You can't do it directly if they have their own solo isolated account, but there would be ways that we can sort of walk you through the best ways to do that. So again, connect with us. And we can discuss what would be the best way to do that for your own clients.
Okay, I just saw a quick one on the chat. What about the use of barcodes? So when you walk up to a machine or an asset, is the CMMS able to read or present information related to that asset through the reading of a barcode?
Yeah, so there are two things that we read in. When you install the mobile, you grant it the rights to use your camera. And there are really two things three, that we can do with that. One is we can read our own QR codes. Anytime you create like a part or asset within the CMMS, it's going to create a QR code, which is encoded with the information that our mobile application needs to navigate to that record. Conversely, if on these parts or on those assets you have the barcode data, when you scan that, the system's going to look and say, do I have something that matches that? And it will present you with that record. You can also use it if you're as a populating tool. This takes us way back to that question of populating assets. But if I were to scan something which to this point doesn't exist in my CMMS, I scan a barcode, it says, hey, I can't find this. Did you want to make a new record? You can actually use that functionality to scan in parts and then create the record because it already knows the associated barcode.
Okay. And actually, that triggers another one from Jamie about any ideas that, I mean, is there a range of printers that could be used to create some of those QR codes?
So currently the QR codes print to a selection of Avery standard label sizings. What's in development now is a much more fluid or flexible, is a better word, engine so that you can print to barcode sizes of your choice. This is more, end of Q4, but that's in play.
Okay. So, a decent question here. Convincing in the maritime industry is tough to do. The relevance of class approval is difficult. Is this a challenge in structuring an asset tree due to reporting requirements? And do you know of any ISO standards that come to mind that could be helpful?
So off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to quote which ISO standards would be relevant, but the asset hierarchy, that the entire architecture is flexible enough that you can set it up in any way necessary, but you want to take it a few levels deeper because it's not just a reflection. So there's a lot of interplay between several different areas of the software. So one of those would be how you classify your assets as well. So because you've got this endless flexibility on asset categories, and there are some standardized procedures within the system that you can have automatically apply contingent on what my asset category is. So you get quickly, it's easy enough to set up, but it's something to consider during that initial discovery phase to say, how do we want to classify things? What are they sensitive to? And are there any of these sort of procedural things that we want to automatically apply based on how this asset is classified?
Okay, that makes sense. So it sounds like we've got a couple of current users of your platform on this webinar today. So at present, Fiix does not have the possibility to do your planning considering the user company's working time. So it sounds like a way of doing time zone control. It means an internal calendar cannot be considered. Are you going to provide it in the near future? Hopefully that
it does. That sort of points towards the discussion of very broadly termed resource planner. And we think of resources, almost anything, whether it's a room or equipment availability, or even a resource as an employee, and what their availability is. And is there a plant shutdown? Is it a holiday, or is he off getting a root canal? You want to be able to consider those resources and what their availability would be in any span in time, and have the system react accordingly. Those resource considerations are definitely 2018 items. I can't give you a date certain on when those are. Again, if you ping your account manager, they may be able to, they'll throw a question over to our development planners and find out if there's a firm date for any of that.
Okay, so we are almost out of time. Next steps, if you wouldn't mind, if there should be a quick survey after you log off. It'd be great if we could hear from you. You will receive this webinar by email tomorrow. One of our Brenner will be working feverish on that this afternoon. And of course, you could always register for some industry-focused newsletters. So I actually take part in those from time to time, and we generally concentrate on a specific topic every week or so, just to help people in the field get better informed on systems within their facility. I mean, the last two I did, for instance, were on central plants. I want to thank everybody for your time, especially Matt. It was good. I learned a lot from you today as well. So that concludes this webinar. I hope you all got something out of it, and I appreciate your time today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate your involving us in this presentation.
Good deal. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.